Hello and welcome to the GreenStream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hello and welcome everyone to the GreenStream. I'm Terry Barclay, President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. I'm so excited that our guest today is Donna Givens Davidson, the President and CEO of the Eastside Community Network. Oh my gosh, Donna, you have a storied career, and I hope you'll kick us off by telling us a little bit about your background and how you came to the role that you're in now.
Okay, well, let's see. I've been doing this for a minute. So I think it was 1985. I was not in school. My parents had gotten divorced, and I was actually living in the community with my mother, really in a crisis state. My mother had gotten a job at the Detroit Health Department for the AIDS project. And so I was working at Trappers Alley, Lands and Sea Gifts. It was kind of interesting because I got to talk to people from all walks of life, and decided I wanted to do something different and volunteered in an organization called the Community Health Awareness Group, which was an organization set up by the Detroit Health Department to help combat HIV and AIDS. And so I started as a volunteer. I was going to be a secretary, and then I ended up doing pre and post-test counseling for the HIV/AIDS test. And then I, started to run the support groups for people with AIDS and people who've been diagnosed. And my mother was a social worker, and so she was, of course, training me and telling me what to do and all of this good stuff. I don't know if anybody knows who Linda Campbell is, but she is the leader of the Detroit People's Platform, and she was over the AIDS project for the Detroit Health Department. And so Linda convinced me to try to go back to school. When my parents divorced, I had debt, and so I ended up finishing up my degree. And afterwards, I ended up, as an assistant director there, writing grants and really engaged in developing programs and policies. And it was really rewarding experience in a most tragic era because so many of the people that I worked with passed away. And so my major had been political science, but before then I had 3 years towards a biology degree. My father wanted me to go into medicine like him, and it really wasn't my thing. But between politics and medicine, you had this intersection of HIV/AIDS. And in talking to people in the support group and through counseling, I recognized that so many people were absolutely brilliant and dying. You had people who were actually living as, who were sex workers, working on the street, and brilliant people, caring people, loving people. There were people who were returning citizens, drug dealers, and of course, many people who were either closeted or not closeted and gay. And everybody had these stories of loss. And so I thought, what if we could intervene prior to all of these losses when people were children and all of these things happened to them? What if there were programs designed to catch people before those things happen? And I was interested in doing that. And so over the past, however many years since then, almost 40 years since, 38, 37, I don't know. Since that time, I've been working in ways to try to help people who are in crisis get out of crisis, to help people find what their potential is and build on the potential that God gave all of us, and through many ways. So I've worked at the Chamber of Commerce. I worked for a grant writing organization where I worked with a whole lot of folks. I worked at the Federation of Girls' Homes, and then I came to the Warren County Development Coalition when I was 30, and I had an opportunity to really work on community organizing and community-driven program development. Left here, went to Big Brothers Big Sisters. Then I became the first executive director of Vanguard Community Development Corporation. Then I left that and I started a charter school business to try to help fix the corporatized charter school education. And that was like jumping from the, right into the flame. I was like, this is crazy. And so I came back to nonprofits and found myself back at Warren County Development Coalition in 2016, having had these many experiences. The organization was renamed Eastside Community Network, and still working on this whole concept that we can help heal communities, that there's great people inside, and that the kind of brokenness that we see is caused by systems, it's caused by experiences, and it's caused by lack of resources. And so if we can help address systems, help build people, and help to infuse resources into places of loss, then we can create change in the world.
Wow. Wow. I have so been looking forward to talking to you because of really the storied contributions of the organization, back, under the Warren Connor name. But also another reason I just am curious, having worked on the front lines of HIV/AIDS, you must have felt like it was deja vu when we got to COVID. And I know that for many of us, that pandemic became real when people we knew started dying
Yes.
Of that disease. So I'm wondering if any of the lessons that were learned early in your career helped you in your work. I'm sure that you were doing many things to help support during that whole pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, the difference between HIV/AIDS and COVID is the stigma.
Yeah.
When you got AIDS, when you received HIV, people didn't want to touch you, be near you, talk to you. One of the reasons my mother got the job as a social worker in the health department, my mother had come out of a divorce and she didn't have a lot of work experience. She'd just gotten her social work degree, master's in social work. But listen, she was willing to work with people with AIDS. My mother was the kind of person who she loved people for who they were, and she didn't allow those types of things to scare her. But there was all of this junk science going on, all of these rumors, and so helping people to destigmatize, but also educate people about the disease process became important. Trying to understand what are the protective factors, all of that. When COVID came along, it kind of caught many people by surprise, just the severity of it. I think, like me, many people thought, well, it's going to be bad, but not that bad. And the first person I knew to pass away was a 42-year-old man named Marlo who we named.
Marlo was the first person I knew too. I mean, everybody knew Marlo,
right,
and loved Marlo. Yeah.
Right. And so just like with HIV, I was like, how in the world did a 42-year-old Black man die from COVID-19? And I have to be honest with you, there were jokes, and it may have just been an inside joke among Black people, that there was no COVID in Africa. And so, wait, maybe Black people won't get COVID. And I didn't believe that that was necessarily true, but I thought, sometimes diseases hit different populations differently. So the first person I know, remember, was supposed to kill old people, not young. And so here this man is 42 years old, so much younger than me. And I'm like, whoa, so I'm afraid to breathe air. But I also was very interested in trying to understand, what is the disease process? How did he get sick, and why did he get so much sicker than other people who get it and actually recover? And so I started to reflect on the social determinants of health, which are largely structural. Things like housing and environmental pollution, and things like access to transportation, but also, the 9 dimensions of wellness, and the fact that in a well community, people are moving around, they're outside, their bodies are in really good shape because they are active. And we have communities on the East Side where people can't really go outside and be active because, they're not walkable, or there's not access to a lot of parks. And then I thought about, the presence of pollution. I thought about the absence of arts classes and fitness centers and places for dance and other kind of recreation activities, and the social isolation that people find themselves in. And so although Marlo had access to many resources, he lived in our community. He lived in places where pollution was happening nearby, and where the streets were kind of walkable, but it was not like inviting. And so we had this space, and this building that is a 17,000 square foot building donated to us by Henry Ford Health Systems. And our major tenant which occupied over 60% of the space, had to move out because of the pandemic. They lost money. And so I said, what if we reprogrammed our space to address this and solve this problem by creating a wellness hub right in the middle of all of this? And we did, and we named it after Marlo. And we have a dance room, and we have a fitness studio, and we have many other things in here. The first year that the Stoudemire was opened in 2021, we also had major flooding going on. And so here you have a pandemic and a flood and all of the impacts, health impacts of flooding and housing. And so we opened our doors and we said, you know what, we're going to help people process their applications for support. We're going to give people kits to clean up their flood water. We're going to install hot water tanks until we run out of money. We're going to hire people to go into people's homes. And so we ended up, being on the front lines of that. And prior to that, even when we were closed physically, we were distributing food, we were distributing resources. We purchased, I don't know how many bottles of alcohol, stuff to clean your hands. We purchased masks and we distributed them as far and wide as we could, so that every community organization that we partnered with had a supply, because I don't know if you remember that these were in short supply. You couldn't get hand sanitizer from the store. So we actually purchased it from a distillery, Atwater Distillery, and it really smelled like strong alcohol, but it was like, how do I make sure that as many people in our community and our staff are protected? And I bought it for my kids. My son lives in California. I'm shipping it to California, distributing it to family. Everybody I know is going to have these protective things. And then a cousin of mine is a virologist, and she talked about, the issue around people's blood oxygen levels going low. And a lot of times when blood oxygen levels decline below a certain level, then the likelihood of people recovering is lower. And so Maggie DeSantis developed COVID, our organizational founder and friend. Orlando Bailey, who had just left our staff as my second in command, developed COVID. And so I'm trying to make sure they get pulse oximeters and other kinds of things. And those were also in short supply. So we tried to supply the resource needs. And then also, and I think this is also important, educate people on the science. Because if there was misunderstanding and misinformation about HIV, the misinformation and misunderstanding about COVID was so much greater. And so we wanted to make sure that our community was acting on good science. I called my cousin, the virologist, in, and we held webinars, and we said, okay, can you explain how the virus works? And then when we had the vaccine, can you explain what an RNA vaccine is? Now, my cousin Marisa, I like to brag about her because she was part of a group, and she was a lead scientist who developed an mRNA treatment for multiple sclerosis. No, not multiple. Yeah, I think it's multiple sclerosis. Anyway, so she developed it where you would inject this virus of the mRNA, recombinant DNA, or whatever it is, and into somebody's body, and the cells would begin to heal themselves. And she sold it to Pfizer and became a millionaire. And so Maritza is still one of the leading Black research scientists in the nation. And so because she understood mRNA so well, we used her. We brought in other people, Dr. El Sayed. We brought in people from hospitals, and we also got a grant from the CDC Foundation to educate people. We held vaccine clinics and other stuff, and we're still doing a lot of that now. So we put a lot of effort into trying to address it. And again, the Stoudemire Wellness Hub continues. It's grown. It's a beautiful facility. I'm really proud of our team for what we've been able to do. We now have 1,100 people who are members of this organization's Stoudemire Wellness Hub. We have about 36 classes every week, everything from pottery to Zumba, martial arts, anything you could think of. And then we have a lot of community dinners. We feed people a lot.
Yeah, so it's just incredible. And just thank you for your leadership in making all of that happen. And, I wish that, I guess the beauty is we see good coming out of very bad things. But I wish we hadn't lost Marlo, that's for sure. But look, just such a point of, I'm sure he is so proud of everything that you have done. through the center. And that it's kind of a good segue, right? Because I'm really curious about your views. It feels to me like you've been talking about your view of sustainability, but how do you view sustainability and the Eastside Community Network? I mean, what's your view and approach?
I got this amazing book on sustainability when I first got here because it was all new to me. And in the book, they said, sustainability is about inclusive social well-being. And I was like, what the heck? I thought it was about the environment, and this concept that, we are part of the environment, right? And that the way that we manage our resources is our human resources, the way that we manage our manufactured resources, our natural resources, all of these resource management issues become part of sustainability. And when you have overuse or misuse, that's when you start having problems. And that's when certain populations are harmed. So if you look at even the history of race in the world, race is a modern concept, didn't used to exist. We used to just all be people living in different places. But when you have people seeking to extract labor and or resources in places occupied by people other than them, they created race as a mechanism to justify these behaviors, right? And so in the United States, there were people here, lots and lots and lots of people here, but there were people who wanted to come here, and so they were categorized into a race. And all of that behavior, I mean, the first product planted in America was tobacco. It's not exactly good news. We weren't growing yams or anything like that. It was tobacco. It was not corn. It was tobacco. And so, when you look at the way that people in pursuit of money, in pursuit of personal largesse, have abused the environment and abused people along the way, then I think you get an understanding that if people treated each other well and people had equal power and access to resources, we'd manage everything better. When we think about the pipeline, the Yellowstone pipeline, it's like, oh, well, I never understood why people were so upset. I didn't even understand that at Navajo Nation, so much of it had been polluted by uranium mining.
Right.
And that the people
out west. So I know that issue well. Yeah.
Yes. But, growing in Detroit, didn't know anything about that. And so when you listen to people talk about the mining, it's not just talking about my ancestral, sacred, this other kind of, mystical stuff. It's also talking about real practical stuff like, are the fish healthy? And are these grounds? It's not about sacred grounds. I mean, it is, right? But we have a way of making these things so exotic and not understanding that they also impact all of us. And so those people who are on those lands are really trying to protect the natural world, and it benefits all of us, and it harms all of us when these things are not being done. Likewise, when you create sacrifice zones in Southwest Detroit, sure, we're over in Southwest Detroit and we all love to put gas in our cars, but the Marathon Oil Refinery is poisoning people who live nearby. And we need to understand that. And we need to think to ourselves, why are we refining oil in this way? Why aren't we moving more quickly towards renewable energies? Because we're able to find people who we can sacrifice in our pursuit of whatever. If we did not have sacrificial people and sacrificial spaces, we would have a more healthy environment. And so I look at it that way. I also think, the boom bust of our economy, the way that we actually go to war, I'm really, 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 really just emotionally impacted by all of the killing that's going on in the world right now, in the name of freedom for American people, and so, but when you look at all of those things, these are battles over who gets control, all of that. And I just think, let's take a look at it. And so in our community, we look at things like housing equity. We look at things like, listen, we have homes inside of our community that are old. It makes so much more sense to fix that home up and maintain it than it does to allow it to decay, destroy it, and allow all of those toxins caused by demolition to be released into the atmosphere. Now you have to find new wood, new glass, new brick, and new resources to rebuild something new. And, what is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we have ways, it's in addition to efficiency, in addition to cost, in addition to all of that, there's a cost involved in building something new and acquiring all these new materials that creates more inequity. So now that you have these new houses you're building, poor people can't afford them. And so you have this widening gulf. A lot of what's happening is in our community is considered progress. Like we get this Stellantis plant, and Stellantis is poisoning our community. And it's not the building of cars that's poisoning our community, by the way. It's painting them with toxic paints that have been banned in some countries in Europe, but are still allowed here. And so the question is, it's not to have a car, build a car, not to build a car. It is to build a car with toxic paint or to build a car without toxic paint. We're not having those conversations. And so what our organization is trying to do is to sort of look at some of these issues and think about them more fully. And then finally, one of the things that we've learned is that there's an M4 zoning designation in the city of Detroit, which allows for intensive industrial activity. And those are supposed to be found in places where you don't have residential neighborhoods nearby. So like industrial parks that are surrounded by land, and there's buffers between that and the neighborhood. But indeed, they're found adjacent to neighborhoods. And so you have this heavy industrial activity that really is saying we're going to sacrifice this space for the purpose of a governmental necessity or some type of social necessity or economic necessity. We're going to do this because we've got to do it. And we'll place it in these places. And it's almost inevitably near places where Black and brown people are living, even in the city of Detroit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So Donna, I really appreciate the depth and the specificity. It's like you've given so many great examples of how equity is at the heart of so many of these issues, and how equity needs to be at the heart of solutions as we go forward. Is there anything else that you can share about the barriers that you've encountered as you work towards solutions? Are there top things that come to mind that you can highlight for our listeners so that everyone can work within their spheres of influence to remove those barriers?
So let me say this. I believe in human beings. Like I said, I believe, we're born with so much goodness inside of us. And I believe most people want to do good things. I also believe that the framework in which we are living right now separates us from those desires, right? So right now, so much of our world, so much of our cities and our urban policy is based on our ability to acquire bonds at low interest rates, borrowing. We live paycheck to paycheck. We borrow in order to accommodate what we want. And the way that I compare it is I look at, if my house, I don't earn enough money in my home. Let's say my husband lost his job, but we still have all the same bills. Then I'm going to need to borrow money to help bridge me over certain gaps. And, the less money I have, the more I'm borrowing, the worse my credit is. And so at some point, I'm in this predatory lending situation. I don't want to be in predatory lending because that's, the check and go. Those are those payday places. So let's say I want to get out of that. I'm going to go to a financial literacy class and they're going to tell me, well, look, these are the things that a credit organization is looking for in order to for you to have good credit so you don't have to, get engaged in predatory lending. Well, Detroit went bankrupt because of predatory lending. It was the credit swaps. But I also want to say that the bond rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, will say, if you want to have a good bond rating, these are the things you have to do. You have to do certain things, like you have to show that there's increased housing value prices, and you have to show that people are making more money, and you have to show that you're bringing in more jobs, and you have to show that that the population is the average incomes and housing values are rising. I think I already said that. But what you don't have to show is you don't have to show anything about equity. You don't have to show that poor people have homes. You don't have to show the environment is being protected, even with the ESG ratings. You don't have to show that. And a lot of times what the city's policies are geared towards is what lending institutions want to see. And I would like for us to be in a world where we are not basing public policy on Standard & Poor's or Moody priorities, but on the needs of the people. And I think we need to examine that. I think we need to understand that racism and sustainability cannot coexist, that disadvantaged people, whole groups of disadvantaged people, and sustainability cannot coexist. And therefore, we need to be evaluating our well-being, our social well-being, not on the basis of how many new pretty buildings and how many rents we've had, but we should be basing it on the well-being of people. And we need a social well-being index to be able to track and measure growth. And I would love for this mayor at the State of the City every year to say, these are all of the things I've done last year, and this is the impact on the social well-being index. I think we need to hold our elected officials accountable for that and have measures for that, because as long as we're just looking at stock market prices, as long as we're just looking at, the rising incomes and the rising prices for land and businesses, then I think we don't understand that the quickest way to increase incomes is to push poor people out. The quickest way to increase home values is to get rid of low-income housing. And if we don't think about that, or to flip it and gentrify it, then we don't understand that what we consider success is actually contributing to the misfortune of many people. And some people call that green gentrification. Some people call it gentrification, but in a fair world, we've got to figure out how to not make housing values the most important thing. And the final thing I'm going to say about that is, a lot of times what people talk about is generational wealth as the justification for so much bad public policy. I would like for us to replace that thinking with the whole construct of generational well-being. There are a lot of people who are wealthy who are not doing well. But everybody who's doing well is doing well. And so I'd love for us to think about that. What is it that we really want our children to have, wealth or well-being? What is it that we want to spread in the world, wealth and well-being? And I hope the people who are listening can think about that and begin rethinking what success looks like for themselves, their children, their neighbors, and also for the places where they live.
Wow. Well, that's memorable. I know, I'm quite sure that people listening are going to focus on generational well-being. That is really quite a huge concept, and a fresh approach, Donna, really, to thinking about this. Are there any other pieces of advice that you would have for businesses, large and small? Mm-hmm. As they think about sustainability and they think about the barriers and the issues that you've been talking about today, one of the things that I'm sensitive to, and I'm sure you are too, is that all businesses are not alike. We've got large Fortune 500 companies sort of with certain sets of issues, but we also have entrepreneurs and startups who I often find worry. They want to do the right thing when it comes to sustainability and equity, but sometimes that gets mixed up with, is it going to cost me more to make some of those choices? And that's entirely understandable. If you're starting up, time is your most precious commodity, and you're moving at the speed of light to try to get everything done that needs to get done. So what is your advice? What other pieces of advice do you have for the business community?
I think, win-win is always going to be more sustainable than win-lose. And a lot of times we say, okay, I'm going to win now and let people lose so that I can keep on winning, because if everybody benefits, I'm in trouble. So for example, businesses that allow for their employees to somehow share in the benefit of whatever that business is producing, have people who are more motivated, who stay longer and who work harder and are more interested in the final result, and businesses that find a way to cut costs by, reducing the cost of employee spending. I know I did own a small business for a while. I'm not going to say I was a good small business owner because I was new to it. And there were a lot of things that I still had to learn about actual business ownership. But I do have, a lot of years of nonprofit leadership. And One of the things I know is I pay my people well, people get full health benefits, and I give people a lot of influence over how they do their work. I want people to own their work. I want people to feel like my success and their success are not separate. And I think businesses operate like that do well. I think this idea, we've got to stop some things and change some social policies around stock buybacks by businesses that allow businesses to divert income from research and development into enrichment. I do know that business owners that want to immediately make $1 million and will take all of the profits for themselves and don't want to share it to or use it to invest in balanced kinds of growth mechanisms end up in trouble. I think that it's helpful to look at the environment in ways that you can differentiate yourself by being environmentally friendly and understand that things that you do now may actually pay off in the future. So I hope that businesses really take that to heart and connect themselves to all of these emerging opportunities for sustainability. And then, we're dealing with so many strikes right now. We can't keep, the casino workers are on strike, Blue Cross Blue Shield, auto workers, actors. Every day somebody new joins a picket line. And I think that what we're seeing is this pushback by people. And I think this has a lot to do with COVID-19, actually. All right, because prior to COVID-19, we had these constructs around makers and takers. And the makers were the people doing the work. And the makers were the people who were making the money. And the takers were people they were paying to do the work. And then COVID-19 hit, and we ended up with this whole construct of essential workers, like, oh, we need them. And once workers started thinking in themselves and remembering that they were essential, it's hard for workers to then be put back into a taker class. And so it's not just that businesses are supporting, are making, $20 million or $25 million, where their workers are being told that wanting to make $35 an hour is greed. But it's also that there are businesses in our community who are supportive of policies that allow that to happen. And I hope that businesses that are small understand that those large businesses that are doing that are creating a world that also makes it more difficult for them to operate. And a lot of times we consider it to be a tax burden is actually, not really a tax burden. Imagine if we all paid enough taxes that nobody had to pay their employees for health insurance. How much of our budget is health insurance? We're paying a whole lot on health insurance. Imagine if we had businesses that allowed for if we lived in an economy that invested in the communities or businesses operated so the businesses did not have to deal with flooding or brownouts or any of the other disasters that make it very difficult for them to function. We need to invest in our social well-being and in the social construct so that businesses can flourish and so can average people. And those Fortune 500 businesses that somehow drive economic thinking are not doing so to the benefit of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, or the people in communities, in my opinion. I think that we really need to all think about the fact that we're in this together. And we're going to rise or fall together. And the United States has to think about where we want to be situated in the world. Because even while we're figuring out these things and our roads are crumbling and we are not willing to invest in bridge repair and other things because we want people to be able to keep their tax dollars, there are other economies and other nations that are actually doing the work of maintaining their roads. I was in Sweden last year. And I'm telling you, it's a completely different situation and we can do it here. If we believe that we are the best nation in the world and we can do the best things, that we need to prove it by doing them and quit saying we don't have enough money for that.
Well, thank you, Donna Givens Davidson, for joining us today and for all the incredible work that you're doing over the arc of your entire career, but especially now at the Eastside Community Network. You are challenging us to think about these issues differently and to look at what we can do differently to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the GreenStream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.